Testing? Testing? Okay.
Testing, testing. Yeah. Thank you, Brett. Good afternoon, friends, ladies and gentlemen. I'm glad that you are early, the early birds who had, I'm sure, like not to miss anything that we have to offer. All right. And on behalf of Terry, we extend a welcome to you. And let me, therefore, now get along to call the first speaker. But before that, I must apologize. We are running slightly behind our published schedule. I hope you don't mind. Please bear with us. But our speakers are all here, and we will start immediately. Now we have, let me just briefly list the speakers which we have lined up today. First of all, we have Ms. Chan Wai Han, and I will introduce them in a little bit more detail later on. Ms. Chan Wai Han, Mr. Leong Si Hien, Dr. James Gomez, Mr. Brett Bowyer, and Mr. Koosh Chopra. So the first speaker I would like to call upon now is Ms. Chan Wai Han. Now, Ms. Chan has been a very active political activist for many, many years. And her good friends and even relatives have faced drastic political actions from the PAP government. Really drastic. So much so that Ms. Chan is an active member of the group known as Function 8. And she has some very important views to share with us on our topic, which is POFMA, the prevention of false and MA, manipulative act. So there you are. We will have many points raised by our speakers, and we will also have a question and answer session at the end of our rally. So therefore, if you have anything to ask, write them down, and our speakers will do their best to answer you. We would encourage you to raise as many questions as possible. Let this be a free, open discussion in all the best traditions of a democratic society. Thank you. So I call upon Ms. Chan.
Thank you, Mr. Kwan. First, must correct something he said about me being a long-time political activist. I'm a long-time Singaporean, 63 years old, a grandmother of 4. That's what I am, my first and foremost identity. I like to think I'm a very loyal Singaporean. That's why I like to be here with all of you to share a few thoughts on this. For short, I'll call it the fake news bill. And please remember, just one thought that I'd like to leave with you at the end of my little sharing. It's about trust. Now, my husband is not here right now. He's working. If someone were to tell me, hey, Wai Han, I saw Ho Fang out there with this sexy lady with skinny appearance, very, very sexy, and his arms were all over her. Would I believe him? Would I believe this person? No. Simply because I've more than 40 years relationship and husband-wife relationship with him. And I know his character. Something must have gone very wrong if he did that. He must be sick. I'll bring him to the psychiatrist. I wouldn't blame him for doing wrong straight away. So there is this deep trust I have with my husband. Do I have this trust with the GOV? I'm afraid so easily. Too many things had happened in the last 40 years as I experienced them. My friends here who had been arrested, detained without trial, whom I felt they were totally innocent, and all the scales fell from my eyes. I could not trust the government 100% anymore. So this bill that they wish to put up with this draconian punishment, can I accept it? No. Oh, but what's the point? You don't accept it, they will pass it still. It will go through, probably, in its entirety. So what is the point of staging this event today? What's the point of me speaking up? The point is, we must make a stand and speak truth unto power. We do not agree with what is being done. We want it to be changed. Best of all, to be totally eradicated from our law books. Look at some of the placards that our younger Singaporeans have put up. We say yes to free press. Censorship kills democracy, right? So, as in all societies which are not free to speak what they want to, it only spells trouble for that nation. So, in the best interest of communal harmony, I shall say what I've just said briefly in Cantonese by telling two stories, two fables. The fable of the three little pigs and the big bad wolf. 各位鄉親父老，我係陳慧嫻，新加坡嘅陳慧嫻。我再提醒一下，唔係香港好扮起唱歌嘅陳慧嫻。不過點解呢個做咗阿嫲4任阿嫲嘅陳慧嫻，愛嚟呢度呱呱叫，同政府話傾下偈，唔愛呢個新嘅法令呢？因為我覺得有兩個古仔，一個係個咩呢？個大灰狼大灰狼的故事。那個小孩亂叫，狼來了，狼來了，最後真的狼來了。政府也是亂叫，新加坡人寫的東西不可信，有時候要制止他們，不行啦，什麼都是他制止。所以要記住這個故事。第二個故事，3隻小豬的故事。小豬起了3間屋子，一間是茅草做的，一間用木做的，一間用石灰做的。最後大灰狼來了，一吹，哪一間屋子不倒？當然最後那間不倒。為什麼不倒？因為石磚與石磚之間有很強的灰泥鞏固着，建成這間屋子。我們跟政府就是需要有這個信字，政府必須信賴我們人民，人民也必須信賴政府，大家才可以合心一意的為這個國家建設，為這個世界做個好榜樣。你不信我，我不信你，夫妻之間也是一樣，是嗎？你又怕他在外面有外遇，這個又怕那個老婆在家裡亂花錢賭博，這樣夫妻間有什麼好講的？沒有好感情。所以政府和人民之間也必須有這份強烈的信任，很好的信念，才可以建造出一個和平、公正、平等的社會。So my last point was, we must have trust between the government and the people. Where we keep having laws that make us trust them less and less, what do? We can only perhaps do such events, write on our Facebooks, send petitions. But beyond that, what can we do? The response must come from the big G-O-V. The G-O-V is not the big bad wolf. Okay, the big bad wolf is lack of trust. So we must build trust among ourselves. And I will say the first thing that the government can do to increase trust is to get rid of this POFMA. So thank you very much. 谢谢各位。
Well, thank you, Waihan. Thank you very much. Now, the purpose of our rally today is to express the views of very concerned individuals, very loyal, dedicated Singaporeans who are concerned with the passing of the POFMA Act, which would seriously curtail one medium of our free speech, and that is the medium, can you hear me? The medium on the internet or social media. Why is the government today enforcing POFMA? Obviously, it is very evident. They want to curtail the freedom of speech on the internet. Many years ago, the government has already severely curtailed another media, which is the printing presses, the newspaper. And they passed the Newspaper and Printing Presses Act in 1975. It was largely readjusted and amended in 2009. They made several drastic revisions to it. And many of the foreign magazines, news magazines at that time, such as the Far Eastern Economic Review, such as Asia Week, such as 亚洲周刊, such as the Wall Street Journal, such as the Asian Wall Street Journal, have faced the brunt of this act. They have been sued, they have their circulation curtailed, and in the case of the Far Eastern Economic Review, do you remember what did the PAP government do? Not only it stopped its circulation, but then they print a private version, the government-sponsored version of the Far Eastern Economic Review, minus all the advertisements. They went to this extent to punish a free press. And as a result today, we do not see the Far Eastern Economic Review. We do not see Asia Week. 亚洲周刊 is still around, but with very limited circulation. Asian Wall Street Journal has completely disappeared. And even the Wall Street Journal circulation has been severely limited. 2 years ago, when Dr. Chee Soon Juan of the SDP wrote an article and published on the Wall Street Journal, immediately all copies of the Wall Street Journal was withdrawn from our library shelves. Are you aware of that? This is the PAP government. And therefore, it is no wonder that the last medium of free expression, which is the internet and social media, they want to control today. Think about it. Share it with your friends. Talk it with your friends. Talk it over. All right? Am I saying it? Am I passing fake news? It is my opinion. Yeah. And the opinion, I'm sure, of many of us today. And I'm sure you would like to hear our next speaker, Mr. Leong Si Hian. Mr. Leong.
你怕什么？你怕什么？你为什么这么怕？为什么政府这么怕呢？怕到要出假新闻的法令。为什么政府这么怕？有可能是因为这个是我的意见而已不是假新闻部长说的给意见是 OK 的部长也是说你传假新闻，你不知道是假的也是 OK 的了。既然如此，为什么我还是站在这里呢？为什么政府这么怕？有可能因为他怕我们的媒体，就是你每天看的报纸，你每天看的电视，有可能他怕我们的报纸跟电视会有时候忘记把真的新闻，把重要的新闻，新加坡人应该知道的新闻忘记播出来。我给你们一个例子你有看过报纸或者电视跟你说新加坡全部的工人有几个不是新加坡人吗？有吗？没有。他只是跟你说37% 的那个全部的工人是外劳啦。其他的63% 是什么人呢？是新加坡人吗？不是，是本地人。什么是本地人？新加坡人跟永久居民为什么政府这么怕？不敢跟你说那63% 新加坡人是多少呢？我计算这个政府不透明，所以没办法了，我看应该是差不多45% 的工人不是新加坡人嘛，就是差不多37% 是外劳，8% 是永久居民就是剩下55% 是新加坡人。但是每年政府给了2万个新公民如果把这2万新公民算进去，那么真正的新加坡的工人是多少呢？是46呢？不是新加坡公民的工人是46呢？47呢？47呢？48呢？49呢？没人知道。为什么政府这么怕？此地无银300两，杀一儆百吧。The previous speaker, Wai Han, told you she's 63 years old. I'm Merdeka generation now, 65. I'm the oldest speaker today. Other than Mr. Kwan, who is the MC, is older than me. Why is the government so scared? Why is the government so scared? Because the so-called mainstream media, the newspapers, the TV, they often forget to tell you what is arguably the real news, or the important news, or the news that you need to know. Let me give you some examples. This is just from yesterday's newspaper, one newspaper only. This is from yesterday's newspaper. You read the news, you say, okay, what's the problem? See, the problem is this. According to yesterday's newspaper, in the first quarter of this year, the unemployment rate of Singaporeans went up, but the unemployment rate of residents remained the same, and the unemployment rate of the overall unemployment rate remained the same. What does this mean? It means the the unemployment rate for foreigners is about the same. The unemployment rate for PR is about the same. But the unemployment of Singaporeans went up. Have you ever, or do you think you ever see the newspaper or the TV asking the obvious question that needs to be asked? Why is it that the Singaporean unemployment rate has gone up when the foreigners, the residents, and the overall has remained the same? Why is the government so scared? Remind me to pick this up, don't be charged for littering at Hong Lim Park, okay? Another article from yesterday's newspaper, same newspaper. No, I think the problem about this being scared or not scared is when you read the news, the important things somehow is often missing, Maybe they forgot, I don't know. You put this in front of me, you sabo me, is it? Okay, I'm not going to read this one. Read this one, sure, kena again, okay? Okay. In the first quarter, the price of HDB flats fell by 0.3%. Since April 2013, that's more than 6 years already, the price of HDB flats has been falling. So the price of HDB flats has fallen in the last 6 years or so by about 14%. Now, what is very strange is that the price of private residential property, in contrast, has gone up by about 8%. So the gap between the 14% drop in HDB and the 8% rise in private property is about 22%. This is unnatural. This never happened before. In the past, the HDB price always go together with the private property price. So how come this question? Hey, why like that? Well, opinion, maybe it's because of the albatross that's hanging on all the HDB flat owners' neck, that their HDB flats will become worthless at the end of 99 years. Isn't it so obvious? Well, it depends on what type of news you read. Real news, fake news, not so real news, not so fake news. Last one from yesterday's newspaper. Why the statutory retirement age is important for Singaporean workers. Now, when you read the news like this, actually it's quite meaningless because it doesn't tell you the real story. Here's my opinion. The real story about aging old Singaporean workers is that our Re-employment Act is the biggest joke in the world. Why is it the biggest joke in the world? Because the employer can determine whether you are fit for re-employment. The employer can determine whether you are medically okay for re-employment. And then the employer can offer you re-employment on any terms, then they will have complied with the act. Any terms. I can offer you a pay cut, I can offer you a different job, I can transfer you to one of the islands, I can make you work on shift 12 hours. As long as you make an offer, you are deemed to have complied with the Re-employment Act. Isn't that the biggest joke in the world? Is this real news or fake news? Well, I'm glad this is the last one. At 65, the memory not very good. Please remind me to throw this away when I finish. Okay? Now, earlier you heard me say that the HDB price dropped by about 14% in the last 6 years or so. Do you know that according to the HDB 1970 annual report, it actually gave the breakdown of the cost of a HDB flat and the selling price. I flat improved, which is like equivalent to a 3-room flat in Radin Mas Red Hill, according to the HDB 1970 report, the cost with the breakdown is actually slightly higher than the selling price. Do you think you will ever read this sort of real news facts in the newspaper or watch it on TV? Why is the government so scared? So, in the 70s, HDB is not making money. A few years ago, it was said in Parliament, you're very troublesome, Singaporeans. Every year ask, can you break down the HDB flat price? Then no answer, right? So finally 1 year in Parliament, okay. They didn't say cannot break down, but anyway, until today still don't have breakdown of the HDB price. But at least in Parliament they told us the land cost is charged at market rates. Hey, what is the real news? When did HDB start charging flats land costs at market rates? And since then, how much money has the government made, arguably, from the sale of HDB flats by charging land and market rates plus accrued interest? Why is the government so scared? Maybe it's tens of billions in dollars. That's why they are so scared. Now, remember I said earlier, why HDB go down, private go up, and the gap is about 22%. Because people are so afraid of the fact that after 99 years, all the HDB flat will be worthless, right? But the real news is even worse. The total value of all HDB flats in Singapore today is more than $400 billion. So if all the flats at the end of 99 years become worthless, and 1 year in Parliament, it was disclosed, Singaporeans use about half of their CPF for housing. So at the end of the lease, HDB flat becomes zero, all the CPF used for the flat also becomes zero. Why is the government so scared? So, HDB becomes zero, CPF becomes zero. How much money in total in future will Singaporeans have lost because of this great combination of HDB and Singapore, uniquely Singapore? More than 100 billion? Is the real news that arguably, in a sense, the government has taken from Singaporeans more than $100 billion going into the future because our current HDB and CPF system? Why is the government so scared? Look at the job numbers. I mentioned earlier, how come the citizen unemployment rate is increased, but the resident and the overall never increase? Somebody put up a sign says no to xenophobia. So you are telling me I cannot talk about the statistics of foreign workers, PRs, and Singaporeans. Okay, I take note of your feedback. I will not talk about foreign workers, Singaporeans, and PRs. But I think no need to say lah, right? Why is the government so scared? Healthcare. Over the years, a lot of people have asked, including myself, Why don't you make public the actuarial report for MediShield Life? Why don't you make public the actuarial report for CareShield Life? They silence there, no answer there. Why is the government so scared? If you make the actuarial reports public, maybe then you can see, are we the most profitable national health insurance scheme in the world? What is the excess of premiums, less claims, plus accrued interest on MediShield and MediShield Life since the scheme started? Is it more than $3 billion? Why is the government so scared? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leong. Now, before I want to call upon the next speaker, I would like to bring about an idea which I was just happened to be reading about. Now, you all know that in the so-called Marxist conspiracy in 1986. Now, the PAP up to today still maintain that they have rightfully and legally detained 22 or 24 Catholic lay workers and some social workers, that they are planning and they are coordinating themselves to overthrow the government by force. And as a result, they were detained, and you know what happened. The Law Society tried to speak up for them, was also shut up. Now, the government up to today still maintain that they have the legal right to detain these 24 persons. If I were today to say that the government is wrong and that the government has illegally detained them, then under the new Fake News Act, the minister can, in his opinion, decide that I am spreading fake news. Because the government thinks that they did the right thing to detain these 24 persons, right? And if I were to say, no, you are wrong, therefore, I'll be spreading fake news. And under that law, if when they pass, in the opinion of the minister, I can be arrested. If I were to say that the 24 persons were illegally detained. Now think about it. What is the logic there? What is the consequences of such a law being passed? I quote to you from this book by my good friend, Dr. James Gomez, Self-Censorship, Singapore's Shame. On page 43, he writes, two individuals connected with the infamous Marxist conspiracy have also documented their experience of their behavioral feature. They have published their detention details, the circumstances behind their arrest, and how the ISD operates. Through the narrative, one can discern the operation of a dominant political behavior among officers within the ISD, where alternative political activity is construed as subversive. See? Any alternative political activity, says Dr. James Gomez, is construed as subversive. Think about it, if such a law is passed. Okay, therefore I will call upon the person himself, Dr. James Gomez, to address us. Dr. Gomez.
Thank you, Mr. Kwan. So it was quite kind of a surprise for me when Mr. Kwan brought that book along, Self-Censorship, Singapore's Shame, written 20 years ago, documenting self-censorship in Singapore. It's free, it's online, Google it, download, have a good read. Because self-censorship is not something new. It has been with us for a long time. And if we are wanting to talk about the impact of the fake news bill, we need to understand and we need to go beyond self-censorship to see what. Out to the organizers last week, to participate in this event because I'm presently traveling around the region, Southeast Asia, conducting workshops, taking part in seminars related to fake news. So I wanted to take a few minutes to share with you how we can understand the Singapore situation in relation to what is happening in other countries in Southeast Asia. My preliminary assessment is fake news bills will lead to fake elections. And I think this is something we need to keep in mind. Not just fake elections, but the whole ecosystem around elections become fake. Whether it's the election commission, it's whether you dissolve a political party in competition, as what happened in Cambodia, or annulling results. So I think this is where we need to keep our eye on the ball, that there is a high risk in countries that pass such legislation that it could evolve into a situation where you have fake elections and ultimately a sham democracy. Now, there are 10 countries in Southeast Asia, 7 have elections. And the trend in the countries that have elections and those that don't, in the way that we understand competitive elections, such as Vietnam, Laos, and Brunei, they have 2 types of legislation. The countries that have legislation related to elections, they generally call it fake news, as we have heard in Malaysia. In countries that do not have elections, they have something called cybersecurity laws. So, what are the reasons that governments give in order to justify passing these laws? Government give 3 reasons in the region. The first reason they give is that they want to preserve social harmony. They say societies are diverse, there are external migration, there are internal migration, society is diverse, therefore we want to have legislation in order to manage communal relations. This reason finds a lot of support within many communities in Southeast Asia. I mean, who doesn't want social harmony, right? So this is one reason the government provide. The second reason the governments provide as to why they want to justify fake news laws is reputation management. Governments say they don't want government institutions, government officials, sometimes politicians, and their credibility to be impacted by fake news. Now, this reason is one of the most hotly contested reasons in the region because many governments have stayed in power for a very, very long time. They have stayed in power for a very, very long time by tweaking the political and electoral system where relevant. And because of this, that's why we have a trust deficit. So the question to ask here is, can fake news legislation resolve the trust deficit issue? I think we are using laws to deal with a problem that is not correlated, right? And the third reason that governments use, and this third reason is a very, very minor reason. So far, only Singapore has raised it, is the interference of foreign countries. Now, for those of us who follow the media globally, we know that in North America, we have this issue of Russian interference. Closer to home, in Taiwan, in Japan, there's a lot of concern of interference from mainland China. But in Southeast Asia, we do not have that kind of issue as being a prominent reason. Where it may happen is cross-border relations, right? So in the Singapore context, a lot of it has to do with our neighbor, Malaysia. So these are the three reasons. So what kind of fake news do people, society wants to deal with, or governments want to deal with, right? The first group of fake news is what we call everyday fake news, right? So for example, people get annoyed when they see messages on Facebook in Thailand where they say this restaurant has human flesh on the menu. So that's kind of an everyday fake news. People are annoyed, they want those kinds of things taken out. Or just across the border, not long ago, we had a situation where the member of the royal family, after one instance, was going to pay for free grocery shopping, and then that went viral, right? So these are clustered on everyday fake news. The other type of issues that are in concern is those that deal with issues of diversity, especially around ethnicity and religion. Countries where this plays out quite a lot is Myanmar, Indonesia, and to some extent, Malaysia. And this is a big concern, and they are thinking about how to deal with it. Malaysia did away with this fake news bill and is looking at other forms of intervention to manage those issues. The third and the bulk of the fake news is around political news, criticism. Because what these long-standing regimes don't want to do is to shield themselves, their cronies, and their institutions away from criticism. So that's what the main agenda is. So if we look at the three clusters of fake news, everyday fake news, those that deal with diversity and those that deal with political criticism, you will find the bulk of it is around fake news. I'll wrap up slowly, and I'm here happy to take questions and so on later to say where is the impact. I think the impact goes beyond self-censorship. Fake news legislation and related cybersecurity legislation affects democratic institutions and practices. First of all, freedom of expression. Academics, journalists, civil society members, as well as individuals, they get clamped down. Because the fake news phenomena is very different from what happened in the US. In the US, Trump was attacking fact-based, traditional, independent media whenever he was unhappy with what was reported about him. But in our part of the world, governments are using fake news legislation to attack the critiques, their critics, from whether it's academia, from media, or civil society, or just lay people. So that's the fundamental difference in our region, that governments are using fake news to attack the critiques. And two, they do so with impunity because governments are the biggest producers of fake news and propaganda. And yet, they do not put themselves on the treadmill of law to be judged, right? In fact, they will judge you, but they cannot be judged. So, first point, practice as freedom of expression. Secondly, it impacts diversity. Now, again, whether it's religious, ethnicities, sexuality, or just, kind of immigrants, refugees, this is another area where we can't speak about these issues clearly. Because if the state says you are wrong, then you are subjected to those legislation. Third, media. Independent media, right? independent media suffer a lot as a result of this legislation. And in Singapore, I think we need to focus on alternative media, especially those that are online in Singapore. It is very interesting because to understand the online media landscape in Singapore, we have to look at our neighbor in Malaysia. When you had online alternative media such as Malaysia Kini come online and being independent, there were a lot of government crony sponsored online media that also come to the space, right? They confuse you. So we need to have some understanding even on our online media landscape where people are coming from and who's independent. And in order for that to succeed, we also need to support them both in terms of human resource and financially. And last but not least is the impact on election or the electoral ecosystem. We don't have to go far. We just have to read news about what has happened in Cambodia. We read what's happening right now in Thailand, because there's a high risk that elections may be jeopardized if you resort to fake news to trip up the momentum of your competitors. So my stance here is, while it's good to look at the legislation legally, intellectually, academically, we also need to look at the legislation politically, because that's where the nub is. Because if we don't look at it politically, then we have a high risk where any form of fake news related legislation may land us a fake elections and therefore a sham democracy. I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. James Gomez. Yeah. Charge. Ask him to charge it. I think I'll speak from here. Okay, Terry? I'll speak from here. Now, whilst Dr. James Gomez has given us a very exhaustive and I think very analytical thesis on the this fake news legislation, I would add on to what he has just shared with us. And I want to quote a very famous politician. All right? I will let you know who this politician is, but this is what this famous politician said. The most dangerous part of the mass media is its power of suggestion. People are imitative. Now, this politician realizes the power of the media. And this politician also realized that today, the mass transmission of information is no more the printed media, but it has gone on to cyberspace. It is on the internet now. Just now, and Printing Access Presses Act of 1975, drastically re-amended in, I think, 2009. So the PAP government has taken care of the newspaper and printing access presses. What about cyberspace? And therefore, we feel that today, this piece of legislation is being proposed to counter the effects of the spreading of news on the internet. So let me just repeat what these politicians say again. In light of that, so the PAP has curbed the printing presses. Now they want to curb the internet also, right? That is the purpose of this act. I just repeat, the most dangerous part of the mass media is its power of suggestion. Who do you think said that? His father. Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, who said that. You see, and therefore, the PAP since that time, when his father was in power, has been doing their best to curb whatever media of the day that can reach the people. So he has very successfully captured the printing presses and newspaper, and now his son is trying to think. He wants to control the internet as well. And this Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, our ex-prime minister, went on to say in the very same topic, he said, the communist countries have decided that the mass media is important. The communist countries have decided that the mass media is important and do not let anyone use it other than those who advance the communist state. If I change the word communist to PAP, isn't it the same thing? Anything new? If I change it and say, the PAP have decided that the mass media is important and do not let anyone use it other than those who advance the PAP state. What difference does it make? Therefore, we are no different from the communists. Think about it. I would like to share this. Go home, think about it. I hope that our rally would resound and carry on beyond the fields of Hong Lim Park. Go home, talk to your friends, talk to your colleagues, talk to your brothers, sisters, relatives, and let this idea spread. Bit by bit. And one person, a very outspoken person against this idea, is my good friend, Mr. Brett Bowyer. And I introduce Brett now.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's going to be interesting because this microphone keeps sliding up and down. So, we're all here to talk about POFMA, the Protection Against Online Falsehoods and Manipulation Act. So before I begin, first of all, I want to say that I'm very heartened to see so many young people here. I've done a few events here at Hong Lim, and I feel a young man when I'm here with most of them. Now I feel like an old guy, but that's a good thing. We need to see more of you out here speaking. Some of what I'm going to say was also said earlier by some of the other speakers, so forgive me if I repeat it. But one of the first things I want to do is put fake news and POFMA in context. Because at the end of the day, what we're really talking about is information that influences how we view our government, what we think about them, and what we believe about them. Yes, there are lots of things on the internet, lots of funny business, scams, all sorts of stuff out there. But this legislation, this law, this is all about controlling the information that you use to decide what you think and feel about the government. And if you think about it, fake news, as I just defined it, didn't exist before the public internet. Because before the public internet, everything that we saw or heard, the narrative we had, what we were taught, that was defined for us. We had very limited sources of information. What you learned in the school, what books were allowed in the library, what the national media said. We've heard a lot about how the national media has been controlled over the years to make sure that it only says what certain people want it to say. So we had a very limited pool of information. But now, with the public internet, we have access to all the information in the world. Anything and everything is out there. I have a thought, I can put it out there. You have a thought, you can put it out there. With that, though, comes two problems. One for us and one for the government. For us, we need to decide who to believe, who and what to believe. And for the governments, and for our government especially, how do they make sure that we believe what they want us to believe? You see, when it comes down to it, it's not about true and false, what is fact, what is fake, or anything like that. It all comes down to belief. So let me ask you a question. Let's just pick two people randomly. So let's say you were saying something to me and you were saying something to me. How would I know who to believe? If I've never met you before, how do I know who to believe? All I can do is try and find out something about you. Once I've found something out about you, I may think about that and I'll decide, I trust you. And that was something that our first speaker spoke about, trust. When we trust someone, we're more likely to believe them. And it's a double-sided thing, because it's not just if I trust you, I will believe you. But if I trust you and someone says something bad about you, then I'm not so quickly going to believe it. So let's say someone says something bad about you, I might go, Echambwe, what? Sure or not, right? I will stop and I will think and I'll go, is this true or not? Whereas on the other side, let's say they say something that is bad about you and I don't trust you, I might go, Gawagong, tell me more, right? I want to know more. I'm open. I'm going to share this kind of thing. So trust is at the heart of this whole thing. So let's look at trust in the context of our government. Most of us believe that Ong Teng Chong was our first elected president. My father met him not long after he was elected, actually. Those of you who cast ballots will know that. Those of you who have read our history books, been to the National Library. All our experiences and all of our documentation tells us Ong Teng Chong was our first elected president. That was 4 presidential elections ago. But overnight, to trigger a reserved election, it suddenly became 5. And Wee Kim Wee, who never had his name on any ballot, was now counted as our first elected president. So which one is fake, 4 or 5? And then, who was the elected president, or should we say selected president? Madam Halima Yacob. Now, most of us know that her IC followed her father. It said her race was Indian. Her Wikipedia page, until the controversy broke and it conveniently got deleted, said her race was Indian. But overnight, she became our Malay reserved president. Now, Kumar recently had a good routine in one of his stand-up routines. Right? He said, Singapore, the place where an Indian Muslim can become Malay. The other part of his joke was, so an Angmo Buddhist is Chinese, is it? Well, I'm Angmo, and I'm a Buddhist. Am I Chinese? Maybe I just don't look Chinese enough, and she looks enough to get away with it. Something to think about there. And then many of us know there about the flyers that were handed out by his supporters. All the Chinese newspaper reports about this mythical $1 million that was handed over and they squandered. That was never proven. And the reasons for those facts being passed around were never given. Right? But someone's obviously concerned we're looking into it, because on the Channel News Asia website, there was an article about how the auditors couldn't find this missing $1 million. That article's disappeared. How convenient. I wonder how many other things are quietly being deleted while we're having this discussion here today. But the thing is that those election, they enabled Charles Chong to win in Punggol East against his Workers' Party opponent. Now, under the POFMA Act, one of the provisions put in prison for that for a very long time. Fake news committee that is writing and proposing this law is Charles Chong. So is Charles Chong guilty of breaking his own law? But we may not actually know that, right? Because it's all been covered up. But even if it was not covered up, and even if it was proved, would it really matter? I say that because also in the POFMA Act, we have the famous Clause 61, where the minister gets to decide who actually has to obey it. He can say certain people and classes of people don't have to follow the regulation. Excuse me. So the minister not only decides what's fake or not, he also decides who has to follow the law or not. So if I'm the minister, all of you got to follow the POFMA, right? No fake news from me. I know what it is, so I'll know. No more fake news. You look okay, so you can say what you like. And of course, I'm the minister, so I can say what I like. Does anyone have a problem with this? I mean, I do. So even if he was guilty or not, Charles Chong could be exempted from the law. So maybe we should call Clause 61 the Charles Chong Clause. It's his back door, his get out of jail free card. So we have facts changing, we have race changing, we have dubious facts, we have rules that some people have to obey and others don't. And this is all from the very same people who are asking us to trust them to write and implement this law. I think there are a lot of things we need to start thinking about here. Now, I think I do have a bit of a solution, so I like to, propose options. It's a 4-step solution. First step is we double check, right? Let's go gong more echumbwe, right? We tell me more. No, I'm going to stop and think, right? And then I'm going to double check and I'm going to verify. And that leads me to step 2. And this is where public education can help. This is where we learn what kinds of questions to ask. Is the source trustworthy? Where does he get his facts from? Does she have a bias? Does she have an agenda? All of these sorts of questions, right? And we can help each other work out what questions to ask. And then we go somewhere and we verify, especially if it's something that sounds controversial. Which takes us to step 3. We get a group of independent people, some lawyers, some journalists, some academics, people like that to come together and create a verification site, something like the Snopes of Singapore, right? We put our own database together that we can verify against. It involves government facts and figures. The various ministries can appoint someone as a liaison to the committee, pass all the facts and figures over. The committee verifies it, adds it to the database. We have somewhere we can go and check. 3 steps. And then we come to step 4, the most important step, which several people also alluded to today. And that is all around trust. It's a 2-part piece. One part, the government trusts us to do our bit. And the other part, the government does their bit to win our trust back again. Now, I see there's plenty of cameras around here. I know the powers that be are probably going to be watching this speech. At least I hope they do. So I say to them, why don't you start acting in a way that builds the public's trust instead of doing things that keeps damaging it? Right? No more changing facts, changing races, changing rules just to suit agendas and things. Right? No more not keeping your promises. What did we hear? CPF at 55. I think Ken was talking about that earlier. 55 or 60 or 65. Who knows? It keeps changing. Or your HDB will always go up. It's your share in the wealth and growth of the nation. Oh, but apparently, no, it's going to go to 0 and you have to give it back to future generations. So it's no longer your share in the wealth and growth of the nation. Or in the 2015 elections, we're hearing you, we're going to take care of the cost of living, and then put the price of everything up and add in new taxes and all sorts of things. So start honouring your promises. Be a little bit more open with us so we know what's going on. Be more accountable. We had a discussion here last month talking about accountability. Yeah, not all in the family. Let's have, a proper government. Those acts of rebuilding public trust will go the longest way to getting rid of any problems that may exist because of fake news, as you define it. Right? We won't have national instability. We will trust you. You will trust us. Then we can work together. You see, trust is a very fickle thing. It's hard to earn and it's very easy to lose. The early generations of PAP, we trusted them, not because of what they said, but because of their actions, because of the results. Right? We saw what they did. It was very solid. We trusted them for it. What about now? We hear lots of flowery words. We hear lots of promises. But what are the actions? And what are the results? Some questions we need to think about. There is a saying, right? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. So now we need to start looking at everything, especially things that are coming out of the government, with eyes wide open. Kwa chun chun, right? I've got to look at you very closely now. Do I trust you or not? Yeah? So we don't need new laws, especially laws that are written so broadly that our own law minister in a recent interview can't vouch for how a future government might use them. So he knows they have the potential for abuse written in that he and his team won't do anything like that. And certainly not laws that have got back doors in them that not everyone has to adhere to. I thought we're all supposed to be equal under the law. Not one law for you and a different law for us. It's rule of law, not rule by law. There is a big difference there. So 4 steps, right? We double check, we be discerning, we create our Snopes of Singapore type site, and the government rebuilds our trust, right? We have a public-centered solution to fake news. 270 million Indonesians just did that for their presidential election. They said they would manage fake news themselves. They did okay. Malaysia is now doing it. They're going to get rid of the fake news laws that Najib put in to suppress his opponents to try and stay in power, which he failed with. And it may have been one of the triggers that the people stood up against him for. We're supposed to be so educated and sophisticated, so why can't you trust the people to know what's right and wrong? Why can't we work together on this one? Right? What about our court of public opinion? Why does the minister have to tell us what's fake or not? And if we disagree with him, we have to go to a legal court. 2 steps. Our side, we do our bit. Government side, they do their bit. So on the one hand, you have draconian, universally condemned, very open-ended, open for abuse laws. On the other side, you rebuild the trust relationship between the government and the people. Fix the people or fix yourselves, right? But what are they going to do? Now, events like this are really good because we are publicly saying, no, we don't agree with this. We know online lots of people are saying they don't agree with this. We see groups from all over the world, academics, journalists, even we had the United Nations just recently, giving all the warnings of what can go wrong if laws like this pass. We heard Mr. Gomez earlier talking about that. What happens when laws like this get passed? Now, a government is made up of a lot of people. It's not just the few that are writing and pushing this legislation. There's a lot of people in there. With all of us talking so loudly, there's no excuse for any one of them not to know what might happen if this law goes through the way it is, and they sit there quietly and do nothing about it. Right? There's no honest mistakes on this one. There's no I didn't know on this one, right? We all know. They should all know. At this moment, but there is one additional thing I need to say. Online recently, hardcore PAP supporters, including the Prime Minister's own wife, have been saying the only people afraid of POFMA are people who are going to spread fake news. Well, apart from the fallaciousness of that argument, how simple and silly that argument is, what I would like to do is I would like to turn it around and I would ask them, why are you so afraid of the people that you need POFMA? Right? The world is telling you not to do it. You're still pushing it ahead. We're telling you not to do it. You're still pushing it ahead. We're a mature population. We're not Swaku mountain turtles. We haven't just turned up off the boat. Right? We're educated adults. Why can't we have a trust relationship? So why do you need POFMA so badly? That's what they should be thinking about. That's what we should all be thinking about. So, draconic, open-ended, open to abuse, universally condemned laws, or rebuilding the trust between the government and the people. Fixing the people or fixing the government and themselves. I think we know what we would like them to choose. I hope they make the right choice. I hope everyone involved in that sits down with their hand on their heart and says, yes, we really need to do it this way. Because this is a decision that can have Singapore going forward in an enlightened manner or being dragged backwards into some dark place that we all don't want to be. So please, I hope they think very, very carefully on this. Thank you very much.
Hello. Thank you, Brad. Now, before I call upon the last speaker, there is something else which I would like to share. And then there's so many things that within the constraint of the space and time that, well, we need to have more of these rallies to really share all the ideas that we may have. Now, I want to bring your mind back to sometime in 2016, not too long ago. In 2016, there was this Singaporean and his foreign wife. They ran a blog called The Real Singapore, TRS. And you know what happened to him? He was, for a post he made on, wasn't that widely circulated? Yet he was prosecuted for sedition. He and his wife, who were the owners of that blog, were prosecuted for sedition. And under the Sedition Act, they were imprisoned. So, since there was no fake news law in 2016, I guess the PAP got smart, and hey, using the sedition law is using a sledgehammer to kill a fly. So, I'm sure they spent many sleepless nights cooking up this fake news law. So now they have another sledgehammer on their hands in the arsenal of weapons to smash you guys, right? Now, how do we prevent this? I've brought out the Newspaper and Printing Presses Act of 1975 and 2009. Yet, Singaporeans seem to live with this kind of heavy-handed legislation designed merely to prop up the PAP and of no benefit to the people. If somebody has said something wrong, you can use the Sedition Act on them. It's already proven in Mr. Yang Kai Heng's case. Why do you need another fake news law? Think about it. And also the printing presses, the Newspaper and Printing Presses Act. Singaporeans continually, since 1975, voted the PAP back to power because we all have not felt the pinch of such an act that has curtailed our rights, our fundamental rights to speak out when we feel it is right. So, the PAP is so bold and arrogant today to come out with this fake news act. Thank you, Solang, for not calling it POFMA, because it has not passed Parliament yet. It is not an act. It is still a piece of legislation. But we all know it will pass because they are majority in Parliament. How shall we put a stop to this? Well, it has been mentioned before by many politicians and parties. We are unable to overthrow the PAP and obtain more than 50% of the seats. Why not obtain 30% first, so that we will prevent them from amending the constitution? Like 4 elected presidents, from 5 elected presidents become 4 elected presidents. from Indian then become Malay. If there is 30% of seats not held by the PAP in Parliament, they will not be able to amend this piece of our constitution, which guarantees the right of our people. But as it is now, they can do anything they like in Parliament. We need at least 30% of the seats in Parliament to prevent the government from at least amending the constitution. They can still pass laws such as this POFMA, right? But we at least maintain the sacredness and the virtues of our constitution, which is well written, but not put into good practice at all by this PAP government. All right, maybe that's too much now. Okay, I will call upon our next speaker. Our next speaker has not spoken here in Hong Lim Park before. Now, the next person is Mr. Koosh Chopra. Some of you may have heard of him before, but let me briefly introduce him. Mr. Chopra is a Singapore lawyer and also an advocate who, a lawyer who does not go to court. He prepares legal cases. He's a person dedicated to constructive change, as he wants me to tell you. He wished to be a force of positive change. That is why he wants to come out today to speak to us. He is a straight-talking champion of change. And he has, I believe, a clear vision of Singapore. So let us hear from Mr. Koosh Chopra.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kwan. Just a clarification. Yes.
Sorry, Mr. Chopra, let me make an announcement. On behalf of the organizers, they have some T-shirt there for sale. Edmund, can you bring me one of the T-shirt here? Oh, okay. The T-shirt reads, "Kick them out." Yeah, someone has already bought one. Or never. If we do not kick them out now, we will not have another chance to kick them out. All right? We do not want to have another situation where the newspaper and printing presses are so severely curbed that nobody ever talk about Singapore politics again other than the local media. So let not the internet or social media fall into the grips and the vices, the iron vice, the iron grip of the PAP. Vote them out. Now this T-shirt, because it is not printed by what you call this is an inkjet printing. It is a little bit more expensive. All right? I was told to give an explanation, and we are selling it for $20. Please consider it as a donation. All right. So $20 for this T-shirt. Please help us. Okay. The organizer. All right, Mr. Frank. The organizer. Thank you. Sorry, Mr. Chopra. I must hand the mic back to you. Very sorry. Yeah. Well, don't worry. We still have enough time for your speech. Plenty of time.
I don't want to run foul of you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Kwan. Just one point of clarification. Indeed, I used to practice law just behind here, 100 meters behind. My office was at Hong Kong Street, but I no longer practice law. Today, my advocacy is no longer for private clients, but it's for the public good. It is... I will. Oh, I'll do that. Sorry. I hope you can hear me now. And so I practice my advocacy in the court of public opinion. Thank you. Thank you, the online citizen, MARUAH, CAN, and Function Aid for organizing this gathering to talk about fake news law. I'm grateful to you for the opportunity to join the other speakers in addressing our concerns about the law. You know, Singapore is a beautiful country. If you look around you, I always say this. It's an amazing city. It's something to appreciate. You have a wonderful new jewel at the airport, great malls, fantastic parks, very clean streets. But what's the point of a beautiful city if the people are oppressed? So today, my comments will be divided into two parts. Time willing, I will first talk to you about some perspectives that I have about the law. We will take a step back, take a big picture look at this, and then we might look at some features that I'm concerned about. So let's start with the perspective. The first one is this. Make no mistake, this law is a severe limitation of our freedom of speech. The freedom of speech is the mother of all human rights. It is the one that girds all other rights. Without your freedom of speech, the other rights become an illusion. Bear that perspective in mind. This law will represent perhaps the single most egregious or serious attack on our right to free speech and expression. And we cannot take this lightly. We cannot say this is business as usual. Now, the second perspective that I want to address is this. And that is that this law will literally be a most disturbing act of governmental interference in the public's right to address their concerns. In fact, may I say this, that it is my view that this law is being passed because the PAP government wants to control what you see and hear. Everybody has said this, and let me just underline what everyone has said, and that is that before 1995 and the internet, the narrative was largely defined by mainstream media, what you knew or what you understood about what was going on in Singapore was what the government told you, because the government controlled mainstream media. And basically, mainstream media has been the stalwart mouthpiece of the government. Now, this fact has meant that they didn't have to do much, because there were no alternative media. There was no alternative. There were no alternative voices. Instead, what you had was what the government told you. 1995, things changed a little bit because you had the internet. And with the internet came social media. Now, what that meant was that you have many other alternative views being aired, and that created a problem for the government, because all of a sudden now there was noise. There was not just their voice. And this has been a big problem for the government, and they have been thinking of ways and means to control the internet, as it were, which is seems like a silly idea, but this law is exactly that. It's an attempt to take control of the narrative in so many different ways. One, by simply defining what is true and what is not. By creating fear, as by suggesting that the mass media on the mass media is very powerful because it suggests to you a certain idea, etc. Now, the other perspective that I want to get to is the fact that this act will do more harm than good. I think this is important. Here, let's make no bones about it. We need to be concerned about the government's ability to abuse the powers that it will get under this act. To start with, let me just say that I'm not saying that there are no falsehoods out there. I'm not saying that falsehoods are not harmful. What I am saying is that the way this act has been constructed, it gives the government too much power, and it will do more harm than good. So, I need not go too far than to say to you that we were told that in Malaysia, they decided to, the Pakatan Harapan government decided to make a promise to withdraw the act simply because they felt that you cannot give that much power to a government. The fact is that a government is an entity that wields a lot of power. And you cannot allow so much power in one entity. I will talk about trust. A lot of people have said that you have to look at trust as a measure of whether the government has done by looking at the results of elections. So what they're saying is, so there was a professor who says, look, if the government is guilty of abuse of power, then what you will have is you will have a price to pay. In today's paper, an editor talked about the fact that you have already given the government a lot of power, and why are you complaining about correcting a falsehood or correcting a post on Facebook? At the end of the day, the government has a lot of power. And if you're not happy, there will be a price to pay. I don't think that's the right approach. Let's look at the track record of this government and look at how they have used their discretion in the past. You have a litany of examples of overreaching, of misuse of power. Let's just take Operation Spectrum. And I see So Lang here. And that gives us one example of some concern that this government has not used its power in the correct manner. It's my opinion that there has been no proof that any of these persons did what they did or are what they say they were. Now, that being the case, if the professor and editor are correct, can anyone here tell me why the PAP keeps winning elections after elections after elections? The fact is that Singaporeans will continue to vote for the PAP even if you throw their critics or dissidents into prison. And I think that has been quite clearly the case for some time. So, this question of trust has to be looked at from the point of view of the Westminster style, parliamentary style of government and the separation of powers. The separation of powers is based and founded on a distrust of human nature, and more importantly, a distrust of the concentration of power. And that's where you get this saying that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And what we've given them is carte blanche to decide what's true and what's false and what's in the public interest. So, the point I'm trying to make is that while, yes, we are concerned with harmful content on social media, we ought to be much more concerned with the harmful use of laws such as this one against the citizens. Now, another context and another perspective I'd like to talk about is the social perspective. What's important to understand is this, that we are talking about social media. This law will essentially be a social media law, if you like. Now, we all go to the kopitiam and we all have a nice chat. And, you know, when you have a chat in the kopitiam, do you expect to be fined or jailed for that conversation? No. Now, some of you may think that this example is far-fetched or not relevant, but I'll explain its relevance. The fact is that what social and social media is a form of social life that's been extended online. Social means informal, casual, not serious. Social really means not work or not official. Now, if you think about that for a second, if you just think about what I've just said, why are we getting so excited and so upset about what goes on in social media? The social context is important, and that's the point I'm making. At the end of the day, you must take this context into mind when you talk about online falsehoods. Our law simply ignores that, and that's wrong. The British House of Lords, in a case they decided about a defamation matter for a post online, made this point and said that you must take into account the social context when you talk about social media posts or Facebook posts. And they say it, and they made it very plain that you cannot treat a newspaper article and a libel in a newspaper article the same way as you would treat a Facebook post. And I think that's correct. Doesn't that seem logical to you? But our law does not set that type of threshold. And that's a real pity. So I'm suggesting that even if you had any law to deal with malicious, harmful content, that you make a distinction between the standards that you apply to social media and how you interpret social media and how you interpret a newspaper or a formal letter. And this is not the case. I'd like you to have is with respect to the amount of authority that this law has given to the government. Now, don't take my word for it. The United Nations Special Rapporteur for Freedom of Expression and Opinion just sent a letter to our Prime Minister to suggest his concern that there is just too much authority given to the government, and that this law, as it was framed and as good as the intentions might be, is wrong. It's unacceptable. And he made that claim. So don't take my word for it. Take the United Nations Special Rapporteur, who is a law professor, and he knows a thing or two. And he said, you can't do that. Now, that brings me to the point about the government making themselves the gods of lies and falsehoods. They have literally become the arbiters of truth. In on suggestions as to them becoming the ultimate arbiters of truth, there was a robust rebuttal. But I disagree for two reasons. First and foremost, the fact is that even if you draw a distinction between ministerial discretion and the exercise of judicial power, if the exercise of the minister's discretion or his decision-making ability amounts to the exercise of judicial power, and in this case it does, because you are talking about a determination about the finding of facts, about the truth and falsehood, certainly a judicial matter. Now, what's happened here is that by the government reserving for itself, at first instance, the right to make a finding of fact and to decide on the truth or falsehood of something, they are acting like judges. That's what I'm saying. Even if they say they are not, even if they say that there is oversight, judicial oversight, they are, the fact remains that they've done it. And the second reason I disagree with the rebuttal that no, we are not the ultimate arbiters, the courts are, is this. How many of you, how many of us will go to court for a Facebook post which you are told to take down? Do you have the money for that? Or do you have the gumption to do that? Most of you will say, okay lah, I'm just going to take it down. I mean, you know, what a waste of my time. Even this I cannot say. And that's going to be the case for 99% of the cases. Do you see where I'm getting at? For all practical intents and purposes, I say to you here in Hong Lim Park that the government has made itself the ultimate arbiters of truth. In Singapore, you know, they are the ultimate authority. And that's really bad. So, I now deal with another feature or part of the bill that concerns me and which is related to what I just said, and that has to do with this whole idea of the accused judging his own case. In many instances of falsehoods, I'm not saying all falsehoods, in many instances, you will find that it's a criticism about the government. Don't you think that's what this bill is about? It's about an attack on the government. Now, that being the case, will it not be that the minister will be deciding on the truth or on the public interest aspects of what you just said about him or his ministry? Now, do you see where I'm going with a conflict of interest? I happen to be I happen to know quite a bit about the conflict of interest. For reasons I will tell you some other time. Now, what's important for you to take away today is that half the time they will be saying, he's attacking me, and that's nonsense. That is utter rubbish. Now, imagine that. Will there not be bias? And that takes me to the next point. There is an associated sort of a common sense rule, if you don't mind me calling it. And these rules apply to any adjudication and are used by many lawyers to attack tribunals who make decisions. And in many cases, this will be your minister. Now, these are rules as to natural justice and as to a fair trial. So natural justice is a general concept, and it applies here. That's what I'm suggesting to everyone here today. Now, it applies in the sense that there are two broad rules. One is that you will not be a judge in your own cause. And from what I've just described to you, do you see that they will be judges in their own cause and in breach of that rule of natural justice? That you will give the person a fair hearing and a chance to address your decision before you make it. In our law, will be caught in a very difficult process after the minister has made his decision. That's not the way it works. In order to arrive at a fair decision, your accuser has to give you a chance to have your piece, to say what you think of what you've just done. Now that's called a fair hearing. Now that rule is also breached. And finally, bringing back that point I made about trust and power, the doctrine of separation of powers demands, I told you earlier, which is that there's this basic distrust in human nature and in power, that you separate these powers, the executive power and the judicial power. But in this case, again, you find that even this basic tenet is breached. Now, what I don't understand is why, despite everyone telling the government that this is a really bad news law, it's not a fake news law, it's a bad news law, the human rights organizations, the UN Rapporteur, many of us here, my fellow speakers, various persons who have written about this, they are the only ones who seem to think that this is just fine. This is a great law and it is going to save Singapore. Well, them and their sycophant, mainstream media that will do their bidding. These are the only two people who are saying that this law is all right. It's not all right. And we are here to express our concern that it's not all right. I think I've run out of time. I have a lot more to say. I wish I had gathered my thoughts better. I thank you. Oh, really? Okay. Oh, well, apparently I have a little bit more time. Let me see whether there's something. Yeah, I think there is one other point I want to bring up. And it's a feature of the law that is missing. And this concerns me. Now, everybody calls this law the malicious online falsehoods law. We've been told it's about malicious actors. We've been told that it's about people with very bad agendas. My question to everyone is this: where is the requirement for malice in the law? Now, if that was your basic premise and that was what you advertise, shouldn't you then include that threshold in the law? I say yes. Thank you. Now, I'm not being facetious here. I'm just saying that if we buy your argument, and if we buy your argument, then have we not set into this law a higher threshold of proof, not just the intention of committing a falsehood, but a higher threshold of malice, meaning ill will, meaning a grudge, a motive. Where's that in the law? So with that thought, I'd say to you that the only reason why they did not put that into the law is because it will be very difficult for them to prove that, because every one of their critics has the public interest in mind and is hardly a malicious character. And on that note, folks, I thank you for your attention and for coming. It's wonderful to see you. Thank you for hearing me. This is my debut speech. Bit nervous about it, but I hope I've made some sense. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you, Mr. Koosh Chopra. Well, I hope you go back and reflect again on what Mr. Chopra and our other speakers have brought to you today. All right? We are a thinking, intelligent population. We are not the daft and stupid population that the PAP makes us to be. We can think for ourselves. We are an intelligent society. We can make the right decisions when the time comes. We will not be led. We will not be easily led. I do not think that what we said today here, me and my speakers, are things that which would stir your emotions to rash acts. You are not going out just to vote out the PAP just because of what we have said today. I hope you come away today with the spirit and the feeling that we are here to a very draconian act, a very, very draconian law. There is nothing short of, thank you, the PAP trying to fix the opposition here. It is simply that. Lee Hsien Loong says that if there are too many oppositions in parliament, he has to spend time fixing the opposition, and there's no time to look after the major business of government. You believe him? It's fake. Yeah. He has no time to do his business because there are so many opposition in parliament, he has to spend time fixing them. They are already fixing the opposition here if this act is passed. What more is there to say? So we appeal to you. Go on, go out, spread the word to all Singapore. Talk to your friends, your colleagues, your relatives. What is this law about? Is it trying to preserve the PAP, or is it good for Singapore that this law is to be passed? Think about it, right? Now, we still have some time before I call for the question and answer. Just let me share with you one little bit of observation I've seen here just now. I did mention, and also Mr. Koosh Chopra also mentioned, and I think James also mentioned about Operation Spectrum. This is a thorn. I saw Mr. Vincent Cheng just now, but apparently he is not feeling well. He has gone home. I see Miss Teo So Lang. Miss Teo, please stand up. I see Miss Lau Yit Ling, please. I see Miss Chuang, please stand up. I see Mr. Kenneth Sang. These are all the victims detained illegally by the PAP and branded as Marxists. If they are real Marxists, let the PAP prove it. If they have taken up arms to try to overthrow the government, as what the PAP puts it, let them prove it. What is real news? What is fake news? You be the judge. As I said, you have minds of your own. You can read, you can discern, you can analyze. We are not the stupid, daft Singaporeans that Lee Kuan Yew call us. Anyway, but please stay back now. We are going to have our question and answer session. All right? And Clement, please come forward, because Clement has bought one of our T-shirts, and I would like to let him to come onto the mount. He has very generously bought a T-shirt from our organizers, and he has even worn it today. So for those of you who would like, this is a T-shirt that our organizers is all right. We have you can put your money here. It's $20 each. Oh, this is a donation. Organizer, Terry.
Let me be the first one.
Can we put it here? Can put it here. The shirt, T-shirt also. Give us a little bit of your donation. Okay, we are very thankful for that.
Okay, well, they're having their beautiful photos taken. Thank you once again. On behalf of the organizers, there's this box that we passed around afterwards. So, we never get anything for doing nothing. I'm going to sing you a Cantonese two-liner in opera fashion, which means you are blessed. Okay? 我祝福你啊，笑面常常見，永生天倫共你享，歡樂綿綿。Thank you.
All right. Will the speakers please come forward? James, Koosh, Brett, Mr. Leong. We are going to have our question and answer session now. So we are open to answer your questions. All right? We are open. Please feel free. And our speakers can answer your question. We will do our best to do so. Yeah. Okay. You hold on.
We have a microphone here if someone wants to ask a question. Otherwise, we can all stand here and smile.
All right, we have a young man here who will give us the first question.
I'm not sure whether I want to ask this question or not, but many years ago, Lee Kuan Yew said that if our opposition in power, Singapore will collapse. I don't know whether it is true, but
you heard that question. The young man asked us, some years ago, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew said that if the opposition comes to power, Singapore will what? Collapse. But let me put that in perspective. Mr. Lee Kuan Yew made that particular statement, not his exact words. He made those words, the exact words, he and his cabinet, what they said was, now this was in sometime during the 1984 general elections, where they know they're going to lose Potong Pasir to Chiam Si Tong. So the whole PAP came out at the election rally, I'm talking about 1984, and said, even if one opposition was voted into parliament, Singapore will scare away all the investors. Those are the exact words. He did not use the word collapse. I remember this very clearly. So he said, even if one opposition was voted into parliament, all the investors will be scared away. Today we have one GRC voting in the opposition, not once but twice. Has this scared away any investor? The PAP is telling a lie.
Yeah, there's also something I'd like to add to this, because quite a lot of people have been asking me this as I've been moving around talking to people. So I'd like you just to all have a picture in your mind. Think about Singapore as a ship, right? And it's got a crew that's running that ship, right? We have a civil service. You know, we have our police, our military, all of these people. They're there day in, day out. The captain gets off the ship doesn't sink. The crew still sails that ship. And actually, if you get a better captain on board, maybe the ship doesn't sail towards the rocks, but it sails to better calm waters. So don't worry about not having the PAP there at the very top, because we've got a very solid...
Mr. Leong will address that.
Allow me to give you the statistics. It's collapse. First quarter, GDP growth, only 1.3%. This is one of the lowest for a very, very long time. If not for the increase in infrastructure spending, in last year's budget 2018, infrastructure spending increased, announced $20 billion. If not for the increase in infrastructure spending, if not for the continuing influx of foreigners, on the average, every year they gave out 30,000 new PRs and 20,000 new citizens. If not the ever-increasing prices of everything, water, parking. You see, when you increase infrastructure spending, every foreigner you bring in, every price you increase, that contributes to GDP growth. So are we not arguably already collapsing? Look at yesterday's Business Times. Do you know there are more than 34,000 private property that are unsold, excluding EC, executive condominium? Do you know that there are about 29,000 private property that are vacant? So, to answer to your question, we may already be collapsing.
Dr. James Gomez would like to address us on the same issue.
Yeah, I think the main thing is we need to recognize government fake news, PAP fake news. And I think we need to increase our media literacy. Recently, by the colleague who asked the question, is something we need to guard against. You know, the state wants to run media literacy programs so that you know what the real truth is. But I think as citizens, we also need to inculcate with us a level of media literacy so we can call out the...
Taking on James. Do you know what's the best defense to fake news? Now, the best defense to fake news is not a law. It's not even education per se. It's a critical mind. A critical mind is the way to address this problem. And unfortunately, this is something which the government, despite its rhetoric, does not promote.
Waihan?
Now in Cantonese, there's this phrase, 若要人不知，除非己莫為. If you do not want people to know, don't do it. So same with the government. If you're so afraid of people sending out fake news, just don't cheat, don't lie, don't tell half-truths. Simple as that.
Wonderful. Okay, we have a question from one member of the audience, Mr. Clement.
Well, it's not exactly a question. It's an invitation, actually.
Oh.
It is from a Christian to all Christians in Parliament. As what the MC said, this is not yet an act, it's a bill. So there will be an opportunity for all Christians MPs, whether within the government, touch their heart and ask themselves, are they being true to their faith? If they believe that this bill is good for the country, good for the people. The latest MP to get into the faith is Lim Swee Say. So I'm sending this invitation directly to him also.
Okay.
Be true to yourself, be true to your faith. Thank you.
Okay. I wish you had posed it as a question. I think the question here, all right, that Clement implied is, will the elected MPs vote with their conscience? Would they put their hands on their heart and think that this bill is for the good of all Singapore? Right? I think that is the gist of, let me phrase it in a question in another way. Okay? So, yes. Will this bill do more harm than good? Let them put their hands over their hearts and give us a straight answer. Thank you, Clement. I hope I've answered you.
Hello? Okay. Okay. I definitely agree with the speakers, right? I'm sure one of you have mentioned that freedom of speech is a basic right? That without it, all the other rights we have, all the other human rights mean nothing. And I really want to agree with that statement. And I think my question is, right, with this passing of this fake news bill, this new act, are we not, okay, first we are going to silence a lot of voices, not just online, right, but offline as well. And I think that will be a very sad state of society.
What is your question?
My question is that, is this going to harm the level of discussion, the level of discourse in society? And yeah, and hope I can get a response.
Who wants to take that? Okay, James.
First of all, they coordinate. They come into a coalition. Right now, if we analyze what's been happening around the bill, you have academics, you have journalists, you have civil societies. I think we need all of these people, including lay citizens, political parties, to come together to form some kind of broad coalition against this bill and other repressive bills that make part of the Singapore political ecosystem. Secondly, the push need not necessarily only exist in the pre-bill period. Even when and if the bill is passed, the lobby and the push needs to continue, because eventually you need a regime change if you want to get rid of the laws. We just have to look across the border, right, in Malaysia, because they got rid of the fake news bill in Malaysia because they have had a regime change. Now, regime change coalition building need not necessarily happen before an election, but that's the experience we took from Malaysia. But if you look in the Thai context, right, the coalition building happened after the election. So either way, you have your options about how to work together to push for regime change.
I think the question raises two interesting issues. The first is about the public interest. Now, does this law seem to promote the public's interest, our government's interest? I'll let you answer that. What do you think? Who seems to be protecting whose interests here? Thank you for that answer. Second is, will the law affect? You've heard that, I'm sure many people have talked about it, but they have paid lip service to it. I think we should not. And I think it is a real concern. Because at the end of the day, what this government thrives on is fear. Its main currency is fear. We live in a climate of fear. And with yet another law limiting our ability to express ourselves, and this time in such broad terms, the fear would be real. And yes, therefore, there would be a real chilling effect. You would think twice before you post it. You would think twice before you forwarded a WhatsApp. Say, is this fake news? Rather than be your casual social self and say, oh, well, this is fierce. I'll let my friends decide whether this is true or not. I just post. Sued for sharing on Facebook. How can that be? You know? So I would like to say, in response to that question, that yes, it will affect public discourse. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Koosh. Yeah. We have another question from another young lady here.
Not so sure I still qualify as young, but
Much younger than me, for sure.
my question is about access to information and transparency. Trust. And I was interested in hearing the thoughts of the speakers on how more systematic publication of data that the government possesses in all kinds of domains might actually interact with the issues raised by this question of online falsehoods and conspiracism. Thanks.
Okay, I'll take that one first. I was at a book launch yesterday of a very well-known academic who's been studying Singapore for like 30 years now, or over 30 years. Most of his academic career based out of Australia. And we've had some discussions as well. Most of the information he finds out, he gets from overseas. I know a lot of you follow my articles online. I do find some things on the government websites, but I also find a lot of my information overseas. I have to see what's going on out of UK archives, the Australian archives, India even, all different places. It's on the outside. So yes, if we had more access to information here, then we would be much more trusting of our government. Why do you keep everything hidden? Why? Especially when it talks about financial things. I've been looking into some financial stuff. We have to make reporting to the IMF, to the World Bank, people like this. So we're telling people outside about us, but we're not telling our own people what we're doing. And so we're all left with these questions. So we have these things like, what are they doing with their reserves? What are they doing here or there? A large part of that, they may be doing the things right. We don't know. But because they keep so much hidden, we have this natural level of distrust. So if they can start opening up, one of the things I said, be more open, then yes, that's going to go a long way to getting rid of that trust deficit that we have right now.
Yeah. Let me just add on to that about this information availability. I'm sure Mr. Leong will tell you that the statistics released by the government today is just so limited compared with what was done 20 years ago. For example, the suicide rates was totally eliminated. They publish it in public, the suicide in Singapore. They took it out. If you want it, you got to apply to, I don't know which ministry, all right, to get it. Why? When other countries pass law to guarantee the freedom of information, the Freedom of Information Act has been passed years ago in the United States, that citizens can apply to the government to seek certain information. We are such a small country. Everything, as what Lee Hsien Loong say, is smart now. At the press of a button, you can get all the information you want. Why do you want to hide? As Chen Wai Han just mentioned in Cantonese, 若要人不知，除非己莫為. If you do not want people to know your uglies, don't do it. What are they hiding? Right? Mr. Leong, anything you want to say?
This is a very good question. I've been analyzing government statistics for about 20 years. I've written a few thousand articles, most of them analyzing government statistics. I've come to Hong Lim Park to speak. I must have done hundreds of presentations on statistics. It is getting harder because nowadays, either a lot of the statistics are incomplete, or they are misleading, or they change the definition, or they are omitted altogether. And if I want to give you some examples, it will take another 15 minutes, so I think forget about it.
Save it for the next rally. Yeah? Okay, I hope that answers your question. Thank you. Any more questions? Please feel free to ask. All right. We are an intelligent and discerning society. We are a population of thinking people. So please feel free to ask.
我只是讲一个很简单的事实，几乎全部的学生老师they know 以前的皇帝是指鹿为马 ，you know what？
Never mind, I will translate.
Now 现在的我的感觉哦，我们的政府是指驴为马，硬把那个驴放到高位啊，就是这么简单的一种感觉而已。
哦，这个是你的没有什么问题吗？没有，这个也是一个问题。就是
指驴为马，以前的政府，以前的皇帝是
就是你
指驴为马
比例啦，是不是？
对，我的感受。
He is saying that in the past, he mentioned a Chinese fable in the past where the emperor said that he brought a donkey in front of all the courtiers and said, "That is a horse," and all the courtiers say, "Yes, that is a horse," just because the emperor say so. So, I guess 我就是猜您的问题就是是否我们现在的政府也是同样跟以前中国的那些皇帝是不是？对，就是皇帝说的就是对，不管是正确不正确，是不是这样的意思？好 ，Well, I'm sure you got the gist of what he want to ask. So,
when the emperor becomes oppressive, he loses the mandate of heaven.
Yeah. So, 我现在也是很简单的，这个大家心里有数。 应该知道，我们现在的这个李王朝是否真正为人民的福利吗？ So, is the Li dynasty having the people's welfare at heart? Do they genuinely have the welfare of the people, of Singaporeans at heart? Your answer is as good as mine, huh? 还有问题吗? Any more questions? Okay 了，我们Terry. Okay, thank you very much. We are happy that although the crowd may not be as big as in some previous rallies, but you stayed with us. And as I mentioned just now, go back. It is important that you spread the message. Spread the message for the good of all of us. We have nothing to gain. All right, to come today. We have nothing to gain except the hope. All of us have the hope that Singapore will be a better country tomorrow with your help. Thank you very much again. Thank you. Yeah. Oh, no, my pleasure, my pleasure. My pleasure. Yeah, thank you. Please come again.